The following is a presentation of the Six Arrows Radio Network.
Episode 57, Ham Radio 360 podcast. This time through Linux in the Hamshack. We've got coupon codes, special announcements, new sponsors, and more coming up.
I'm Kevin, Kilo Whiskey Zero, Kilo Whiskey in St. Louis, Missouri. This is Ham Radio 360.
MTCRadio.com presents Ham Radio 360, the podcast, with your host, Cale Nelson, K4CDN.
Hey, what's happening? It's Cale. Thank you so much for stopping by the Ham Radio 360 podcast. Appreciate you every time you tune in. I know that a lot of you guys just get this in your player. Some of you listen to it on your phone, some on your computer, some both. Wherever you're at, we appreciate you stopping and taking the time to ignore the craziness going on around us, to enjoy some camaraderie here in the amateur radio hobby. My name is Cale. Call us Kilo 4 Charlie Delta November. I've been licensed for about 5 years now. I live in South Carolina, and if you're from the north of the left coast, that probably just made plenty of sense to you because about every third word you're getting. And that's okay. I'm just kidding. Really, I am just kidding. We've got a great audience made up from folks from all over the world. We're getting stats now. We're seeing that we're getting listeners from France, Spain, Italy. We had a gentleman from Singapore on last time. Anyway, thank you so much no matter where you are for listening. We're here to encourage you, to help educate you, entertain you in everything regarding amateur radio, our favorite hobby, ham radio. So thank you again. Thank you. Can't say that enough. You know, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have people like Whiskey 7 Delta Bravo Oscar contact me and ask, hey, can I be a sponsor of the show or the site? And I said yes. So commstogo.com, 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 brand new site sponsor. You can find them on the right-hand sidebar right there where it says site sponsors. Check it out. I got a new box from them the other day. John sent a box. It's really cool. It's got a 12-volt battery. It's got power distribution, power poles, battery charger, all in a box. It's really sweet. And be looking for a review for that coming up. I'll put something in the show notes, but there will be a review for that coming up pretty soon. And I think you guys are going to really like it, especially if you're looking for turnkey stuff. If you don't want to put the time in, they're putting the time in. Him and his family, amateur radio operators, bringing gear to the hobby. Love it. Commstogo.com, brand new site sponsor. And you can find it at hamradio360.com. And speaking of site sponsors, how about show sponsors? We've had a deal with Main Trading Company before we started, and that's a long story. We've told it many times. They've been around with us since day one plus, and they've been around in the industry for about seven and a half years or so now. One of the biggest dealers in the country now. And it's really exciting for them. And what's really cool about having a partnership with somebody like MTCRadio.com is that you get these random emails from the guy that runs the place. His name's Richard Lenore. He's crazy, man. He loves selling radio gear. Well, just the other day I got an email. I mean, completely, totally out of the blue. Cale, hey, I just released these new coupon codes, and please tell everybody about them. Well, there's two codes, and we'll have them in the show notes. We're going to talk about them throughout the show here, but here's the big one. If you're looking for a brand new ICOM IC, and I can't say the model number, but the one with the touchscreen that really works well right now, that's the most awesome, hottest thing happening, if you want one of those, Richard's offering $75 off until the 29th of this month with the coupon code HR360. All right, let me say that again. If you want the brand new ICOM IC, really wish I could say the model number there with the touchscreen that works really fantastic on HF, you need to go to the website, mtcradio.com. Check out, put the code in HR360 and save $75 on your brand new HF rig from ICOM and mtcradio.com. So this has been a long time coming. It is finally happening for you now. Some friends of ours, the Linux in the Hamshack podcast, which is one of my most favorite podcasts to listen to about amateur radio because it's not that I understand everything that they say. Matter of fact, I understand very little past the cooking recipes from Cheryl. But what they talk about interests me, and it interests me to the point that I listen every time they release a new show. So I want to take this moment here to welcome Russ and Cheryl and Bill to the show. Guys and gal, welcome in. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having
me.
us.
Yeah. And us.
Thanks.
And the rest of us, yes.
Yeah.
all of the crew.
Yeah.
The current crew.
We've got everybody at one time on the show here, which is really cool, and it's quite a surprise. We've got Russ K5TUX, Bill, whose call I really dig, NE4RD. You can't look at the call and not see nerd. And then Cheryl, who shares the same call as my wife does. They're yet to be licensed, if you're curious. Russ, tell us a little bit about your getting into ham radio, how you got started.
I got started in the early 90s, around 1991, just about the time that Linux was getting its start, so that's kind of nice. They sort of happened independently of each other, but I just have always been interested in technical things. I was a EE major in school to start with, kind of went a different route with that, but what wound up, what the hell was that? Sorry. You're going to have to do some editing. And I have to. We should find out if we need to be family friendly. I assume we have to be family friendly, right?
To the best we can. To the best we can.
I can do it.
Okay.
So anyway, I've just always been interested in technical things. I actually was a DJ in college, so I liked radio in general, and ham radio or amateur radio seemed right up my alley. It had all the technical components. It had the ability to get on the air. And of course, I played around with CBs and stuff in the 70s and 80s. So I had that background as well. So it all just led up to loving ham radio and sort of the idea of it, being able to talk all around the world. And this is really before the, cell phones became so prevalent in the world and everything, and there really weren't that many modes of communication that could get you all over the planet. So it just seemed like a lot of fun to me, and that's how I dove into it and got my ticket in 1992. And as it happens, finally upgraded to Amateur Extra this year in 2016.
Wow.
Took a long time, but
congratulations.
I'm there. Yep. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Bill, how did you get rolled into this?
Well, I got into amateur radio about the same time. I think 1994 was the year I got my first ticket, and I was interested in radio communications through a group I was part of as a kid called Civil Air Patrol, and we did a lot of communications, and I served as a communications officer for them. So I was kind of interested in the whole communication thing, always setting up antennas and everything else for all these remote locations that we'd have to set up at the airports to run sorties for downed aircraft and other ELT, emergency locator transmitter missions and stuff like that. So I kind of got involved with that. I was doing bulletin boards back in the day, and a friend of mine who ran another bulletin board in town was a ham, and he kind of got me hooked up with an Elmer, and so I went and got my license at the Melbourne Ham Fest in Florida back in '94, and haven't stopped messing with amateur radio since.
Cool.
It's been a great hobby, and I just love it, and I'm a true nerd, so I'm into all parts of the hobby and also computers and stuff like that.
It's amazing what you forget when other people start talking, because I did that whole BBS thing too, and I was actually in college on BitNet, which was the inter-college network system before the internet. So,
oh yeah.
Well, I had a Commodore 128
mailer and EchoNet.
I had a 128. We had a 300 BPS modem that we never connected. I guess my dad never got it figured out, but yeah, we just played games. That was okay. That was and I was in a CBs and car stereos, so that kind of that's how my love for 12 volts, I guess, came around. Tell me a little bit about. Now, I'm going to say this: we've been podcasting here for almost 2 years. We're 50 plus episodes in. You guys have been podcasting for how long, Russ? How long has the LHS podcast been happening?
First episode was released in October of 2008.
2008. So that's quite a while.
That is a while, yep. But it doesn't add up really over the time, since we only release bi-weekly.
Yeah.
So, we're up to 172 episodes in 8 years. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but there's a lot there if you go back and listen to it. Whoa. And we have had people call in or write in and tell us that they started listening like this year or last year and went back and listened to all of them. I can't even imagine doing that myself, and I put the show out.
Yeah, they binge listen. I think that's the proper term for podcasting now is binge listening. And, the funny thing about that is you say it doesn't sound like a lot, but there's a lot of work that goes into this. Now, our podcast isn't live and it isn't streamed and whatnot, but you guys do live audio. And do you do video as well when you're streaming or not on your recording?
No, we only do audio. We did do video near the beginning of the show. We did probably 12 or 14 episodes with video. Mm-hmm. It just turned out to be untenable as far as that. And since we release an audio-only podcast, it kind of turned out to be pointless. So, yeah, it's just audio.
And it's still a lot of work. People have no idea, really, the amount of work that it's not that it's overbearing, but there is a lot more work than you three just sitting down and chatting about Linux. I mean, there's a lot that goes into this.
Well, absolutely, because you have to get the content from someplace, so you've got to scour the internet every couple of weeks, find things that sound interesting to talk about, and then if you find a technology that interests you, you don't want to just get on the program and say, oh, well, we found this technology here, you should go try it out. We actually go in and try the stuff ourselves and try and give it a personal perspective. So you actually have to spend time, downloading, building, using all these applications and whatnot that you're going to talk about to try and make it interesting.
Now, one of the questions that I know people write off, and I get this question a lot when I talk or tell folks about your podcast. Number one, and most folks listening know this answer, but just a real brief answer. What is Linux?
Well, the answer that you might get from a lot of people is that Linux is an operating system. Okay. Which would be entirely incorrect. Linux is a kernel, and if you're just a lay user, I guess, to pick a term, then you're not really concerned about what a kernel is. But what a kernel is basically is all of the code that can boot your system up. It has all of the hardware drivers. It interacts with your computer's built-in operating system, the BIOS, and all it is the code that gets your computer from a powered-off state into a state where it can run an operating system. That's what Linux is. It's just the kernel. Now, people will say that it's an operating system, but that's actually two pieces. That's the kernel, Linux, and GNU, which is the software. And there's also lots of software out there that's not GNU, but in the early days, GNU, which is actually a recursive acronym and stands for GNU's Not Unix. It was Richard Stallman's project to create software, which was an open version, and we'll talk about openness later, I'm quite sure, version of Unix, which is an AT&T Bell Labs technology, which is proprietary, commercial, and all that. So Stallman decided he wanted all of that software to be available to everyone, not just the people who could afford it. So he started writing the software. What he didn't have was the piece that actually booted the computer up. They tried to make one, and they're, in fact, as I understand, is still working on it. But in the meantime, Linus Torvalds said, well, they have all the software piece. We have this operating system, or we have this kernel that we're trying to put together with the operating system so we actually have a complete computer operating system together. The GNU project wasn't getting their crap together, so he went out, took the Minix kernel and the Unix kernel, rewrote it as his own kernel, apparently named it Freaks at the beginning, Freax, decided I guess he didn't like that, kind of settled on Linux, thought it was a little bit egotistical, and then wound up going with it anyway. So he did the kernel piece, Stallman and his group did the software piece. You put them together, you get GNU Linux, there's your operating system.
Nice. That's something I've always wondered about is there's a history behind everything. And, of course, we all know the history of Windows and IBM and Apple. But a lot of those technologies that we enjoy, a lot of technologies we enjoy today are Linux technologies that folks have no idea that they're even based in that.
Embedded systems and phones, if you're using an Android phone, you're using Linux. Some people know that, many don't. But lots of embedded systems, set-top boxes, TVs, single board computers, all kinds of things like this run Linux, run the Linux kernel and software on top of it. And largely people are unaware of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm an Android guy. I'm one of the, I think there's 25 to 1 of me, and I'm okay with that. So that's kind of hard sometimes when you're used to something, you don't realize that other people use another operating platform. So sometimes I forget that not everybody else uses Android. When you kind of got the idea to put Linux and ham radio together, and I know that there's thousands upon thousands of things we can do with it in our ham shacks and even outside the shacks. I want to talk about your podcast for just a second. First, I want you to tell us where we can find it, because I said it wrong when I was on Dave Jackson's show. First, tell us that, and then tell us why you decided to start podcasting in 2008 when it was really kind of an obscure platform, and then why in the world did you choose Linux and ham radio, which are two pretty obscure platforms as well?
Well, let's start with where you can find Linux in the Ham Shack. It's at lhspodcast.info. I used the info domain because back a couple of years ago they were selling them super cheap. Now they're kind of the same as everybody else, but I was like, well, I'm going to save a few bucks here and go with the .info.
Right.
So it's not a com, a net, or an org. It's an info, but lhspodcast.info. Now, to talk about why podcasting in 2008 and why mixing Linux and ham radio, unfortunately, the person to answer that question is not among us today, because I'm not actually the one who started the show.
Okay.
I don't know if you've actually gone back and listened to the early ones,
I
but
haven't gone back that far, no.
Okay. Well, the original host of the show was Richard Bailey, KB5JBV, and he's the one who started the whole thing. He was doing his own podcast back then called Resonant Frequency, the amateur radio podcast. And I've
heard of that.
Yeah. There's quite a few episodes of that out there. I think there are 50 of them. And he was doing that contemporaneously with Linux in the Ham Shack when he started it in 2008. But he basically went out there and was looking for a co-host. And I was doing another podcast with another ham back then. It was his side project, and his name is Michael Dell. I can't remember what his call sign is, but he's up in Michigan, and he did the Ham Radio Podcast, or I don't know if he still does that or not, but anyway.
Well, I've seen it listed on the players, so it may just be there.
Right. So he was doing that, and I was doing his side project called Strange Today. So I was podcasting then. And so I was looking for a project of my own, and I saw that Richard was doing his podcast and wanted to start another one about Linux and ham radio. And I was like, well, this is right up my alley. So I told him I was interested in doing it, gave him my limited credentials, and the rest is kind of history, I guess. So
that's a cool story.
But again, I don't know why he chose to. I mean, he's into Linux just like I was. He's way more into ham radio than I ever thought of being. And he wanted to put the two together, and he figured having two people on the show was better than one, based on the fact that he did his own show with just himself. And so that's how that goes. And he did the first 100 episodes. And then since then, we've had sort of a revolving crew, but we're going to keep the show going forever as far as I can tell.
If we'll just start using AI if we have to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We're going to continue here with Russ and Bill, and Cheryl's in there too. We're going to get to Cheryl in just a sec as we continue this episode of Ham Radio 360. Guys, stick around.
Hi, Dan, KB6NU here. There's always been a bit of a mystique about operating CW, and sometimes it's difficult for newcomers to literally crack the code. Well, that's what my book, The CW Geek's Guide to Having Fun with Morse Code, is all about. Written in my no-nonsense style, it's full of practical information that will help you have fun learning and using Morse code, including how to choose a key, how to tune in CW signals, how to make contact, and then what to do once you've made contact. Let the CW Geek help you have more fun with Morse code. Go to kb6nu.com/CWGeek and get started today.
I got an email just the other day from our friends at bridgecomsystems.com. They've got repeaters, and they're looking to make deals, right? They're selling repeaters along in a package deal, right, with mobile radios, with handheld radios, whatever you're looking for. If you're wanting to put up a repeater in your local area, if you're wanting to put up a 220 megahertz repeater in your local area, you need to make sure you check out bridgecomsystems.com. They have the repeaters. They have the controllers. They have the power supplies. They have all that you need to get started with your repeater system at bridgecomsystems.com.
I don't know how well we're answering these questions, but we're giving it a go.
You sound good to me. We're back. We're back with Russ and Bill and Cheryl from the LHS podcast, the Linux in the Hamshack podcast, and this is something that we've been talking about again for quite a while. Glad to finally make it happen here. We got to meet Russ at Dayton this year in a very sick state, but he was still awesome and great to catch up with him. And Bill, we welcome you in again as well, and Cheryl's here with us. The whole crew from the Linux and the Hamshack podcast. Guys, I have so little experience with Linux. It's almost scary. And all of my really smart friends are Linux guys. And they're always like, well, Kel, you just need to learn Linux. And I'm like, yeah, and I need to learn Spanish and Chinese. And, yeah. So for somebody who is very limited time experience into Linux, my experience with Linux is this. I bought a netbook that I loved, absolutely just adored this little netbook. Had Linux Mint 13 on it, I think. And, man, it was awesome to use. It was so lightweight. The program, you could just tell it wasn't bloated, and it worked so well until I just burnt the hard drive to pieces trying to use it for a podcast. So if I'm in the ham radio, I'm a diehard Windows user or I'm a Mac user, tell me why Linux would benefit me in the Hamshack.
Anybody else want to answer this, or am I?
Well, I could take it a little bit. Why would you
take a bite?
Let's get Bill Steve, and then maybe I'll think of something.
Okay.
What was that?
I said you're up, Bill.
I'm up. Why would I want to use Linux in the Hamshack in general?
Yeah.
Well, there's a wealth of programs out there that people have been developing over the years and improving, and just about every application that's out there today for amateur radio in some form or another is available on Linux. And as you just said, your Linux Mint machine on a netbook ran blazingly fast. And that's really the experience that most users have with Linux in general, is that they're able to take some of this older hardware. And like hams, we like, being a little budgeted in our ham shacks, and we don't always have that latest, i7 Broadwell chipset and everything else sitting in our ham shack. We have probably a, 2 or 3, 4 or 5, 10-year-old computer in the ham shack. And, we'd like to get a little bit of life out of it. And Linux is a great solution for that. And there are, which we'll get into, there's lots of distributions out there that make it super easy for even the new user to use Linux in the Hamshack. But applications you'll be able to use in your Hamshack will be just the same. You have WSJTX if you're into those JT modes. There's a numerous amount of logging applications that interface directly with Logbook of the World, QRZ, HamQTH, and just about every other service known to man. FLDigi, a lot of people use all the random digital modes. FLDigi is cross-platform, and you can use it in Windows, you can use it in Linux, and it works exactly the same. And it's a great way to allow older hardware and new hardware run very fast and do the job that an amateur radio operator needs in the Hamshack.
Well, here's a question I've got for you. I heard a guy one time, not too long ago, when I think it was Windows 10 was being initially announced, and this guy was just screaming about all the back doors and all the ways to get in and to see what you were doing, and people could hack your system so easy through Windows 10. And I don't know if there's any truth. I'm not making that assertion. I'm saying what I've heard. But he was stating how stable and how safe an environment that Linux can provide any user. And I would imagine that, as we're logging and whatnot, we want to keep up with those things. Is it a much more stable and safe environment on a computer for Linux?
I would say comparably, it's very similar. Okay. I think Windows 10 got a bad rap.
Okay.
With it wasn't necessarily the ability to break into the system. It was just the ability. It was just the telemetry issues of Microsoft sending heartbeats back to the mothership there to gather data on users and usage of the system so they could improve it. And we have to remember, I know we're not really talking about Windows 10, but we have to remember that Windows 10 is kind of like a release that's ongoing. It's constantly being improved upon. And, much like Linux, it's constantly being improved upon. There's always going to be, bugs that are found throughout its life cycle. And it's actually good to see that Windows 10 is finally catching up to the way Linux and a lot of these other distributions handle getting these updates pushed out to the computers in a very rapidly maintained environment. And this prevents a lot of those, being exposed to exploits and various, hackable attempts and stuff like that on your home computer. So it's really like Windows 10 took a cue from the rest of the Linux environment. Don't you agree, Russ?
I do, but there's a key difference between operating systems like Windows and Linux, and that's the idea of the openness of it, the Libre part of the freedom, because even though Windows 10 has chosen, Microsoft has chosen to be a little more open about how they're dealing with Windows 10 and how they're keeping the security updates out there and everything, you're still beholden to the corporate culture of Microsoft to kind of do the right thing, because they're a black box organization. You can't see inside unless you happen to be inside. Very few of us actually are. The openness of the Linux platform, and I don't know how far down this rabbit hole of open software we want to go, but I'm sure that's part of what we're talking about here. But the idea then is that because the code is available to anyone, there are many eyes on the code, and those people are all keeping track of what's being put into the code. And so being able to sneak in a backdoor or the ability for the mothership to track telemetry data and stuff like that is very hard to do, because there are always people looking at the code. And when someone tries to slip that backdoor in, people who are in the know, who, whether by design or by accident, are vetting code, can look at it and say, oh, no, this person is trying to slip something nefarious into the code. We need to do something about that, change it. And that makes it safer for everyone who's using it, even those who aren't familiar with the software or would have no idea how to mitigate an attack or a backdoor or anything like that. So it helps everyone that the code is available.
Well, that's a good that's a good point to lead me to my next question. Is Linux is all about openness. It's all about the open source, and you talk about this a lot on your show. You talked about it when we had you on at Dayton about the openness. You guys even play open source music on your show, which is really cool. One of the questions I have is for someone who may not really understand the whole open source, how can you give me a pretty elementary explanation on that?
Well, the easiest way to explain it, and I hope this is easy, is that all software is code. It's a bunch of lines of written code that are then compiled to make them run faster. Now, without going into a whole semester of computer science, just to take code that humans can understand and convert it into binary format that computers can understand is the step that makes it fast enough to run on the hardware. So all the code gets compiled so that it will operate more quickly. The difference is, in Microsoft's case, for example, there are only a few people who are in Microsoft's domain who write the code and who ever see it before it gets compiled into a format that people can't understand, therefore they can't see into, in order to operate the computer. And that's what's released as Microsoft Windows, for example. So that's a piece of software that comes on a disk, but if you actually wanted to see what code generated that bytecode, you can't because they don't release it. Now, Linux and other operating systems are the opposite of that. They give you the binary form that runs on your computer, but they also give you the code, the human readable code that generated the bytecode. So you can see and understand, you can go look for yourself to see what code is actually running on your computer or your set-top box or your phone, or in an increasingly prominent part of the world, your bionic implant. This is like a real thing because people are, genuinely concerned about the fact that their pacemaker needs to be running open source code because you don't want to get a virus and have it stop your heart or something like that. And this is not even science fiction. This is happening today.
Wow.
That's a real use case or a real, I think, powerful reason that openness needs to be promulgated.
Right. And that's one of the things that draws a lot of people, especially in the amateur radio hobby, to that end of the spectrum, Linux being there, is that they can go in and read and learn the code. They can learn how to code themselves. They can build out programs, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, to operate in their shack or on their radios. But there's a lot of things, a lot of questions that I have. And we could probably do 4 or 5 shows just on this one topic, but the distros and I'm assuming that's a shortened term of distributions, and those would be like in Kel's mind here, Linux Mint would be akin to XP, and Linux whatever would be akin to, say, 95 or 98. Is that a good simple way to look at how we understand from out here, outside of the Linux sphere, those things inside Linux?
Not exactly, but you go exactly if you want.
Yeah. I mean, distribution is really, these are the companies or the groups of people that are using the Linux kernel to generate a sort of a branded OS package. So, things like Linux Mint, I mean, that is a complete suite with a themed environment. The windows look, very specific to their particular branding. You have companies like Canonical that do Ubuntu. A lot of people use Ubuntu. It's a pretty common distribution. And there's a multitude of these smaller micro distributions that have a very niche market. Mm-hmm. Ubuntu's has been fragmented into multiple. I don't know if fragmentation is a bad word, but into multiple distributions based upon what users like. They have different windowing environments, and that's kind of obscure. The most of them look like windows. Little box frames with an X to kill the window and a maximize and a minimize and stuff like that. But they'll have a different system underneath the hood there that actually drives and draws those windows on the screen, and they'll have a different performance characteristics and stuff like that. But every distribution will have its own little nuance about which set of packages they deploy along with the Linux kernel. And so, you end up with different versions of those distributions. And as you go backwards in time, you're basically going backwards in revisions of those packages and the Linux kernel in time. So like Linux Mint 14 is probably a 3-something a kernel, where today we're using 4.4 inside of, I believe 18's out already.
Okay.
What did you have to add, Bruce?
Well, keeping in mind there that the kernel is an entirely separate piece. So if you wanted to run, for example, Linux Mint 12 with the 4.4 kernel, you can do that. Because going back to what I said originally, all the Linux kernel is doing is setting up your hardware and actually booting the computer up. And what software you choose to run beyond the kernel is up to you. It just so happens that the distributions, the companies that put out the distributions, package usually the software that's GNU or whatever it is they want to package in their system with, generally speaking, whatever the latest kernel is. Now, depending on the style of distribution you're using, that might be a stable kernel or it might be a development kernel. So it might be more advanced than another distribution or something like that. So I guess when you're looking at like XP versus 95 versus Windows 7, for example, those would all be Linux Mint, something like that. So a distribution is more like a corporation,
Okay,
than a version of software.
I just learned something. That's what we're here for. That's one of the things that always confuses me, because you hear Debian, you hear Ubuntu. I can't even say it. It won't come out right now. I'm sorry.
Oh, you want me to say it?
Yeah, Ubuntu. Is that right? Ubuntu.
Yeah, Ubuntu.
Ubuntu. Yeah, it sounds like we're learning some deep tribal language here.
It is actually
360.
Ubuntu is an African word, which means community.
Oh.
So that's where that. And the thing that throws people off is that in most languages, and I actually studied language too, so here we go. Most languages other than English, vowel sounds only have one sound. Whereas in English, vowel sounds can have lots of different sounds.
Right.
But in the particular language that generated the word Ubuntu, the U always sounds the same. So it's Ubuntu. Now, lots of people say Ubuntu because that's an English way to...
Yeah, an Americanization or whatever of it.
Because we changed the way the U sounds.
Yeah.
But the real word is Ubuntu, and a lot of people find that, who aren't apparently native African, hard to say. So,
well, here you go. Continuing to learn here on Ham Radio 360. That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, I've got a question for you. If I have an old Windows machine here, I said I've got an XP box. Well, I wouldn't do it to an XP box. I would. So I've got an old XP box, and I want to use it to run FLDigi in the Shack, and it's too slow. And Bill's already told us that this Linux software will run real fast, real light. How hard is it to convert from this Windows software or whatever's on there over to a Linux distribution?
Okay, well, I want to discourage the use of the word convert.
Okay.
To start with.
Transform?
No, because there's no blend between Windows and Linux. That sort of thing doesn't happen. You can either overwrite or you can coexist.
Let's talk about overwriting, because I understand coexisting.
Okay.
I'm married. Sorry.
That's okay. Overwriting is easy. Overwriting is the same way as writing.
Okay.
And you do it the same way you would Windows. The most prominent way that people would overwrite something with Windows would be to take the disk of it, the CD or DVD, throw it in their machine, boot it up, walk through the install process, which is, fairly hand-holding when it comes to Windows. And as it happens, also very hand-holding when it comes to Linux. And I would think that you could stick the average lay user in front of a laptop with a bootable Linux distribution or Windows CD, and they would have no trouble making a bootable working laptop out of that.
Cool. Now,
so,
I see people. I've got a live DVD, they'll say, or I've got a thumb drive or whatever they're supposed to be called nowadays. I've got one of those, and I want to make this machine full-time Linux. Is that what you're talking about here? You're talking about just completely overriding what was there?
Yes, that's the general idea. Okay. Now, with a live distribution, that's something you brought up just a second ago. A live distribution allows you to run without install. It's basically the concept of live.
Okay.
It means run sans install. So if you have a bootable thumb drive or USB drive or flash drive or whatever it is you want to call it, that has a live Linux distribution on it. There's a specific kind of Linux distribution. It came around, I believe it started with Knoppix. I think that was the first one.
Yep. Knoppix and DSL were your early live distros.
Right. And the reason those came about is because people wanted to be able to boot a machine or to use a machine that was self-contained without having to overwrite their internal hard drive. And in a lot of cases, Knoppix is used as a rescue disk. So if you have a machine that won't boot for some reason, the live distro is handy because it doesn't require any hard disk in the system to be accessible. You can run it straight off whatever media you have handy, whether it be a optical drive or a thumb drive or whatnot. So this technology is now being used to demonstrate to people the power of Linux, for example, because you can run it on a computer that has Windows on it without destroying it.
Yeah.
And in the case of a thumb drive, USB media tends to be very fast. So you can run it in an almost installed speed,
Wow.
From removable media, which is very nice. And it gets people interested. And then they also contain an installer so that if you have access to the internal storage, you can then overwrite and have a bootable machine running GNU Linux as opposed to your Windows.
So that's really a good place to start, is if you can get something like that to kind of get your feet wet. And then if you like it, you just press the install button and goodbye, Mr. Gates.
That's
absolutely. And a nice part about the live CD as well is especially on some of these newer laptops and newer computers, they have some pretty new hardware that comes out every year because, these hardware manufacturers got to continue their R&D and make new products.
Yeah.
It gives you the ability to test all your hardware to make sure that you're not going to have any problems during install. Is my Wi-Fi card going to work? Is this going to work? Is that going to work? And, this is it's the same with even Windows these days. You throw a Windows disk in and half the stuff doesn't work, especially on laptops because they put so much obscure hardware in these things. It's kind of nice to be able to test a fresh live copy of something to see if you're going to run into any kind of random oddness instead of just, blindly installing it and then all of a sudden, wow, I can't get on the internet because my Wi-Fi card doesn't work or something like that. And, we've always had to deal with this in, enterprise Windows shops. That's why Dell makes specific disks for these computers because otherwise you wouldn't be able to boot it with the RAID controller or anything else. It's just pretty much, a doorstop.
So where does somebody find a live disk or a live USB drive for getting started with Linux?
Well, pretty much any distribution will have a live install disk, and I think almost all install disks are live disks these days, except for a few distributions that are more specific, like let's say what would you say, Russ, like Arch or some of these more geeky renditions?
Yeah, what we would call collegiate or advanced distributions, like Arch Linux or Gentoo. Yeah, they don't generally have live distros or live bootable installers. However, for all of those distributions, there is somebody out there who has created a live version of those to make it easier and more accessible to those people who don't want to get down and dirty with something like Arch. They'll release their own distribution that's based on Arch, which has a nice, easy-to-use installer and is live bootable and that kind of thing. So for all those distributions out there, there's something for everybody. DistroWatch, I believe it's .com, keeps a running list of like all of the distributions that get released as they get released. Plus, they have like a top 10 list or a top 25 list or something like that. Mm-hmm. So, and they also, you can search by keyword and stuff like that. So if you're looking for a noob-friendly distribution or something like that, or have specific requirements for your distribution, you can use a resource like DistroWatch. And, of course, you can use the ultimate resource, Google, to find the distribution that's right for you.
Which runs on Linux, too, by the way.
Well, it runs on everything.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I gotta take a break, but I got what I think is a good question if I don't forget it over the break. We'll be back in just a minute. This is Russ and Bill and Cheryl from the Linux and the Hamshack podcast with Kel here on Ham Radio 360. Back in a few. You look around my shack, you look at my vehicles, you're going to find one thing in common. All right, they're American-made vehicles because that's just what I buy. And there's Kenwood radios in almost all of them. You look in the shack surrounded by Kenwood radios. There's a reason for that. There's a reason. I love their Kenwood gear, and I buy it from one place only, mtcradio.com. Right now until the 29th of this month, just a few days, guys. I mean, you listen to this too late, you're going to miss the deal. $10 off any order. You place an order with mtcradio.com. Enter the coupon code HAMRadio360, HAMRadio360. You're going to save $10 off the order. Kenwood gear on sale now. mtcradio.com and save an additional $10 with the code HAMRadio360. That's mtcradio.com. Back again with the crew from Linux and the Hamshack podcast. There's a lot to be done with Linux and amateur radio. And if you guys are a listener, if you're a listener to the Linux and the Hamshack podcast, which you should be, it's one of the most interesting amateur radio podcasts out there. It's really entertaining too, guys. Thank you very much for your great show. You hear them talk about Debian Pure Blend, and that's the question I had. Tell us a little bit about the Debian Pure Blend for amateur radio and Linux.
Well, that's great that you phrased it that way, because the Pure Blend is a concept within Debian that allows the maintainers of certain groups of packages for Debian. We haven't really talked about package management, but there are groups of people within the Debian organization that maintain software that's released with the Debian GNU Linux distribution. And they've had this crazy idea not very long ago that these groups should put out distributions that are dedicated to certain functionality, like scientific applications or pharmaceutical applications or language applications or whatever it happens to be. One of these groups is the ham radio group. There's a group of maintainers within Debian that maintain all of the ham radio specific packages that are released under the Debian GNU Linux distribution. And what they did was, since Debian, just as a pure distribution, not as a pure distribution, as a base distribution, tries to cover some basics, like it has an Office suite and it has, text editors, web browsers, communications programs, email software, things that the average user might use when they install it. That's what it comes with by default. Well, the ham radio Pure Blend is that very same thing, except it also includes all of the software that's maintained by the Debian ham radio maintainers. So it's that same core set of applications, including your word processor, your web browser, your email client, so on, also happens to contain a whole mess of ham radio specific applications, including things like FLDigi for your digital modes, your loggers, your DX clients, your APRS clients, your D-Star clients, your FreeDV client, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that stuff comes pre-packaged. And when you download the distribution and you create your thumb drive out of it to boot it up in your laptop or your desktop PC or whatever, all of that software is pre-installed and ready to run. And that's the idea behind the Pure Blend.
And that's a good place for us to start as new guys coming into Linux with amateur radio aspirations. Putting them together, the Pure Blend would probably be the easiest place to go.
I think it's one of the easiest. It's the one we talk about the most. Ever since it came out, I've been pushing it. And I've been using Linux since Linux has basically existed. I've been using it since the early 90s. And my Hamshack PC, the one that's sitting right here over my right shoulder, runs the Debian Ham Radio Pure Blend, because to me it's the perfect place to start for that purpose.
Fantastic. There's nothing like finding a one-stop shop, especially when you're trying to figure it out.
Right. There have been other efforts at creating ham radio specific distributions, but usually what they are is another distribution that is then packaged with usually software, ham radio specific software that is used by and popular with the person who creates the distribution, rather than all of the available software.
Right. Okay.
So there's a few of those out there. They tend to be a little bit buggy and have specific issues. So we try not to recommend them necessarily because they aren't as easy as they could be. But since the Pure Blend is a standard Linux distribution, and a very popular one, by the way, because a lot of the other distributions that we've talked about, like Linux Mint and Ubuntu, are all based on Debian. So under the hood, they're all the same. And then this one just happens to have ham radio software with it. So it's a kind of a win-win.
It's pretty awesome. If we've got a Raspberry Pi sitting around, that'd be a good place to plug that in, maybe?
There is... Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, let's talk about the Raspberry Pi because it is a Linux-esque platform.
Well, the Raspberry Pi is simply a computer, just like any other computer. It's not Linux specific. However, there are Linuxes that are specifically created to run on the Raspberry Pi. There are a couple of specific issues about the Raspberry Pi, though. The first being that the Raspberry Pi has no onboard storage. So in order to run something, you have to run it off of flash, because that's the only way you can boot a Raspberry Pi. So you have to have a live distribution in order to boot up a Raspberry Pi. So this lends itself perfectly to Linux, because that's sort of how Linux has gone. So Raspbian is a Debian version of, well, it's a version of Debian for the Raspberry Pi. And it's interesting to note that the Raspberry Pi has another specific issue. It's not a desktop PC. It uses an entirely different chip architecture. It's not an i386. Your average desktop PC has an Intel chipset. Well, the Raspberry Pi doesn't. It uses the ARM chipset. So you have to have a distribution that is recompiled for ARM. Your standard version of Debian that runs on your desktop will not run on a Raspberry Pi. This was done because the ARM chipset has much lower power consumption and can be very powerful in small embedded systems like the Raspberry Pi and others that use it. But you must use a distribution that is compiled for ARM. Debian happens to be one of them. Debian is probably compiled for more architectures than any other Linux distribution. Windows, for example, except for one new version of Windows 10, is not compiled for any architecture other than Intel. So just by virtue of that, you can't run Windows on a Raspberry Pi, except for, like I said, this brand new version of embedded Windows 10.
Right.
Which I've never tried, and I actually don't know anyone who's tried, but yeah.
I think everybody was excited about that for about 30 minutes when it was announced, and then it kind of went away.
Well, until they realized it was generally just command line only. It's like, oh, I can't run Outlook on it. What do you mean?
Yeah, I don't even know where's the Windows, man. All I see, yeah.
Well, the nice part about all this ham radio blend, the pure blend packaging, is that it is already compiled for ARM as well. So you can get all these meta packages into your Raspbian, I would assume, wouldn't you think?
Yep,
Press?
absolutely. I didn't really go into the pure blend itself because it's being released in two different ways. Debian, of course, is a rolling release, and it has multiple different versions that are extant at any one time. Right now, the stable release is called Debian Jessie. And the next release, which is what they call a testing release, is Debian Stretch. Now, what they're doing is they're taking Jessie. I'm talking about the ham radio people right now. They're taking Jessie, and they're releasing it with the ham radio software pre-installed. But what they're then doing is creating meta packages. I think there are 12 of them, maybe 14, that are going to be released just as packages in the next version of Debian. So there won't be a pure blend after this necessarily, or you won't have to use it, because all you'll have to do is install Debian and then install the 14 meta packages, and you'll have the very same thing. So that will be available on any architecture available to Debian with the next release, whether it be ARM or RISC or PPC or Intel or whatever.
Right. These are for Debian Stretch, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I almost knocked the microphone off the boom. It's hot in the barn, guys. The sweat just got in the eyebrows there and dripped right down in the eyes. Yeah, it's summertime, and that's an interesting point. So and this is not a Raspberry Pi show, but it's when we get a Pi and we're running software on a Pi, we're running Linux. When we have our Droid phone, we're running Linux. When we're does the Amazon Fire run on Linux? Just curious. I don't know why that just came out. I'm just curious. Do you know?
It's an Android kind of device as well.
Yeah. Okay. I thought it was.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. So.
Yeah, I believe there's ways you can hack the the Google Play Store directly on it, but for the most part, the Android Fire is just the the Amazon Fire is just like a what we would call a fork of the Android platform.
Okay. Just a personal question, because I had no idea.
Just like Android itself is a fork of Linux. So
yeah, exactly.
Okay. So let's bring Cheryl in, because she's been so patient with us guys talking about this stuff, and she has to be one of the most patient women on the planet to do this show with you guys sometimes, because you sometimes give her a hard time, which really turns into some great comedic value, by the way, because she can take it. This lady can take it. She's not afraid of these men. But Cheryl, one of my favorite parts of the Linux and the Hamshack podcast is your recipe corner, and I would love for you to share a recipe with us here on the show.
Well, actually, the recipe that I have decided to share with everybody is something that I am fixing for our 4th of July festivities at our house tomorrow. And I know this, of course, won't come out on the 4th, but it's a super great, really easy summertime dessert, and it's for a icebox cake, which requires some strawberries, some Cool Whip, some graham crackers, and I'm going to add some blueberries to ours to make it more patriotic. But what you do is you put a light layer of Cool Whip in the bottom of a 9x13 pan, put a layer of graham crackers on top of it, spread some more Cool Whip on top of that, thicker this time, with your fruit, and any fruit will work. Most recipes call for fresh strawberries. I'm actually using frozen, and there's all kinds of frozen strawberries, and you want just the strawberries, not the strawberries in a sugared syrup, just regular fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Spread a thicker layer of Cool Whip, a thicker layer layer of strawberries, more graham crackers, and just layer this. And then on the top, of course, you're going to want to do something pretty with the strawberries or whatever. And it's best to refrigerate it overnight. But at least for 6 hours, so the graham crackers have time to soften up and actually turn into a cake. So
I'm in. I'm in. You got me.
Yeah, it's I'll send you the recipe, but the recipe calls for 3 pounds of strawberries, a box of graham crackers, like a 14-ounce box of graham crackers, and about 24 ounces of Cool Whip.
Wow.
Or some sort of frozen, yeah.
And the best part of Cool Whip is it's almost zero fat. It's almost zero sugar, and this just sounds delicious. That's awesome.
Yes, it's very good.
And if you get any you go to, you just eat it later. You just take it with you.
The longer it has time to rest,
mm-hmm.
the better it is. So I'm sure if there's any leftover after our party tomorrow, although we're expecting 35 to 40 people at this point, if there's any leftover, I'll probably be eating some for midnight snack tomorrow night. So
Russ is saying make 2.
Yeah, I think he likes it too.
I do like it. When you anything that's kind of like a strawberry shortcake, when you have a nice cracker element or crumb element with fruit and whipped topping, how can you go wrong with that?
Right. Yeah, and it takes about 5 minutes to make it, and there's no oven involved.
Right. That's the best part. Is July, right? Bill, when you go off the air with these folks and Cheryl does her recipe, do you go to the kitchen and try to cook up what she just shared with you guys? Is that part of your cooking? Yeah.
Yes, it makes me hungry. We normally record this in the evening time, and it's like, it's time to hit the refrigerator on the way upstairs.
Yeah, the chicken recipes are always good. There's a lasagna recipe that sounded great. So if you guys are wondering what I'm talking about, if you listen to Linux and the Hamshack podcast, Cheryl has the recipe corner. She does a recipe every show, and it's generally something that Russ likes. And so Russ gets to pick the music, she gets to pick the food, and Bill just eats crackers by himself.
Yeah.
Out on the plains by himself. Poor Bill.
Yes.
Poor Bill.
Well, Bill's the new guy. He's still learning the ropes and going through the hazing process. So, he gets the short end of most of the sticks.
Well, it's working really good. You guys have the rapport was immediately great. just in my opinion. I was like, wow, this is a new voice. And I think when it happened was when I was on the plane to Dayton, I found the transition episode. That's what I was listening to. And I was like, hey, I recognize that call from Twitter. So that was really cool. I had no idea that anything, was coming, but it was cool how it turned out. You guys do bi-weekly shows, and it's lhspodcast.info. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And of course, Cheryl has a recipe corner. They go through the news of Linux, and we haven't even really touched to the tiny baby toe dipping in the water here of Linux itself. But it does, the Linux platform, it does have quite a bit of use here in the amateur radio community. There seems to be just loads and loads of people using it. And one of the things that gets me when I listen to you guys talk on your show, you're like, oh yeah, I wrote this, whatever you call it, and it makes something over here work. And I'm like, wow, how cool is that to be able to sit down and write your own software to achieve a result in your Hamshack. I mean, do you guys do that a lot, or is it just something you brag about on the show and you just kind of do it maybe once every month or so?
Well, for me personally, I do it a lot, but it's also part of my job, my daily job. So I spend a lot of time coding for work, and then it just kind of spills over into my personal time. And usually, because I've been doing it for so long, it's easy for me when I'm looking at a piece of software that I've just downloaded and it doesn't work exactly the way I want to. Since I'm already ensconced in the open source world, I can browse through the content, find the piece that doesn't work or doesn't do the thing I want it to do, and then I can just go ahead and fix it rather than wait for some developer at Microsoft to do it for me. So that's always a nice thing, and it's not really braggable. You find that over time, the more you work with it, the less ego there is in providing packages or contributing code to open source projects. I mean, it's just part of the community. It's if you're a user, it's what you do.
And I think the most important part there is the contributing part, because as Russ or I or anybody modifies the code and looks for improvements or additional features, there are other users out there that want those features as well. Mm-hmm. And a lot of projects allow you the opportunity to push those changes back in to the application and then allow it to be redistributed back to users. So this is a great way, and this is how open source works. Everybody has their own point of view on what should be in the application and how it should go forward. You have a project maintainer that kind of steers the ship and makes sure nothing gets in there that doesn't belong. And we all work out, all make out the better because of the open source contributions.
As we continue on with our quest here on this podcast to continue learning about everything there is to know about ham radio, the question arises sometimes daily, usually at least weekly. What can we do to save amateur radio, and how in the world can we bring the youth that are coming behind us into this hobby? Is coding, we've talked about the maker end of things just a few weeks ago. Is coding one way that we can bring some youth, some vitality into the hobby?
Always. Coding is a great tool to allow them to understand that it's not just to be a user, but to be a creator in the environment that they enjoy. So many of these kids are on tablets and all these devices that have radios in them, and virtually they're doing radio every day. They just don't realize it. And the more we can make them understand and learn how to access that stuff and be a creator and a maker, I think we're going to get far ahead in that effort.
Well, I think the ham radio community, the maker community, and the open source community are all basically the same idea. They all have the same tenets. They're all about inclusiveness and openness and sharing and contributing and creating. They all have they're all in the same mindset, and so it's really not a far push for someone who's interested in one to get other folks interested in any or all of them.
With someone who's interested in Linux, who's interested in learning to be able to write code, contribute to the code, I know that here in my hometown, there are groups that get together and have like meetups or whatnot. Is that a good way to kind of, for a new guy who who maybe let's just say for instance, my local radio club, this is not their cup of tea. They're not interested in this at all. So is something like that a good way for me to involve myself and have, for lack of a better term, but to have one that's familiar to us all, Elmering into the Linux sphere? I mean, is that a good way to kind of get myself introduced to the hobby?
If you can find the groups, it certainly is. I know where we are, the groups are few and far between. But if you're in an area where those groups exist, or you have enough personal fortitude where you can go out and pull a group together, something like that, to get people together and talk about these things, special interest groups or Linux user groups or hacker spaces, maker spaces, any of these things. Mm-hmm. If you're in a place where you can join one of these or put one together, that's a fantastic way to learn to share and to communicate.
And you never know who there may be interested in the amateur radio hobby as well. And you just kind of build from there, right?
Absolutely.
Cool stuff. Guys and lady, I really appreciate you being on with me. I know that we were kind of like playing ping pong all over the course here, but it's Linux, like amateur radio, is just a huge, vast plethora of different avenues and different things to follow. But I've learned some things, and I think to that point, I would like to have you guys come back with me and get some more listener feedback and get some more of my questions out on paper, and if you would, we'd love to have you back again.
Well, that'd be great to be back. And I know when Richard and I first started the show, he thought that we wouldn't be able to do more than 50 episodes just based on content. Well, we're 172 in. We've done a bunch of side products, and I honestly can't see any end to the information, because there's always, every time I turn around and Google, Linux or ham radio, there's something new to talk about, or something old has become new again, or something like that. So I don't think there's any end to the things we can talk about.
Well, I've appreciated you both, and Cheryl, thank you so much as well for coming in. It's been great to have you all on, and we'll do it again. Tell us one more time, Russ, where we can find you so I don't get it wrong. And we want to make sure our listeners here on Ham Radio 360 are coming over and giving your show listens. A lot of fun, guys. Totally fun and informative.
Well, thank you. And we hope everybody comes by and stops by for a listen. We also have a chat room and a live broadcast when we do record. You can find information about all of that at lhspodcast.info. And we do record live bi-weekly at 8 o'clock Central Time on Mondays. There's a show calendar on the website to help you locate when we're going to be live and all that. And we have a chat room on Freenode if you're into IRC and all of that. So we'd love to have you for the live program, or just pick up the podcast in your favorite podcatcher.
Absolutely. And what we'll do is we'll put all your Twitter handles and all the links, of course, in the show notes, because we want folks to follow you around, because there's quite some entertaining some posts. Bill's very busy on Twitter. He's a very busy Twitter guy. But enjoy those.
I have fallen off of Twitter. Obviously, I need to get back on there.
Come on, Cheryl. We need the Recipe Corner on Twitter.
All right.
There you go.
At Recipe Corner.
Do it 140 characters, though.
EAT exclamation point. Yeah. Hashtag EAT.
Yeah,
Yep.
there
you go.
I appreciate y'all very much, and hope you have a great rest of the summer. We'll get together again maybe toward the fall. I know that Jeremy had talked to Russ about doing a really deep Linux show, and that may be something that becomes may show up on our new Workbench podcast, because they're ramping that thing up pretty heavy too. So I appreciate all three of you being here, and look forward to chatting with you again really soon.
Same here. Take care.
Thanks, Cam.
Thank you.
So another fun episode on Ham Radio 360. It highlighted my ignorance. Stop. It highlighted my lack of understanding regarding Linux. I mean, guys, it's something I really want. Yes, Gerald, sit down. I know that you want me to learn Linux, and you can, and so can your wife. Yeah, I know, but I'm working on it, okay? Give me a break. I've got a lot of friends who are big Linux folks, and they really, I didn't mean to say folks, friends who really enjoy using Linux. And it's just one of those things that I just haven't taken the time to do it. The Raspberry Pis are kind of pushing me there. I've got a couple of machines here that it runs on, and man, does it make an old machine run like a new machine. So that's kind of why I wanted to bring those people on here. I almost said folks again. I'm trying to stop saying folks. Thank you, Adam Curry. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the show. If you have never listened to Linux and the Hamshack podcast, I want to encourage you to do that. Now, we don't normally have other podcasters on the show just because we're all out busy doing our things, but I know that there's so much going on in the hobby around Linux, around Raspberry Pis. I thought that this might help you guys. I know it helped me some. Understand why Linux was so important to what we're doing in the hobby. So make sure you check them out, Linux and Hamshack podcast, and I think you'll enjoy it. I never miss one. It's a lot of fun to listen to. I got to go, but I appreciate you all being here with me again. Thank you. I sincerely appreciate all you're doing. Don't forget, we have patches now. We have stickers, hats, shirts. The shirts are on sale, so all that's under the shopping link. And, of course, we want you to subscribe and share with your friends. Anyway, you know what to do. Go to the website. If you're looking for something to do, go to the website, hamradio360.com. We've got you covered, so don't miss it. Thank you so much for listening again. I'll be back in a week or so. Till then, Jeremy and George will come in this next week with their episode number 3 of the Workbench Podcast. Guys, appreciate you listening. Thank you so much. God bless every one of you. We'll see you next time. 73, y'all.
Thank you for listening to Ham Radio 360, brought to you by mtcradio.com. For more information about the program, visit hamradio360.com. Till next time, 73s, y'all.